What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Frame of Mind. If you're new here, welcome, and make sure you like and subscribe. So this week was extra special for me because I got to sit down and have a conversation with one of my closest friends, Aditi Shah. Aditi is a yoga and meditation instructor for Peloton in New York City, as well as a talented model and actress. Aditi was first exposed to yoga as a kid, and her love of movement brought her to reconnect with yoga after college. She spent several years living in India, where we met and became friends, and where she rediscovered her passion for yoga and connected with her roots and heritage. After moving back to New York City, Aditi pursued her first official teacher training, and she's now completed thousands of hours of training, has led multiple teacher training events at large studios, taught private lessons, corporate classes, workshops, and was voted one of the best teachers in New York City on ClassPass. Aditi and I discussed her journey to becoming a yoga and meditation instructor, her teaching philosophy, and what yoga and meditation represents to her. If you're interested in hearing what Aditi had to say, keep watching. Thank you, first of all, for joining me. I'm really glad we got to talk because I've been wanting to have you on my show for a long time. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yay! Meters and Dieters time to talk.
Here we are.
Yeah, I know, totally. So I'm sure, like, obviously, you and me have known each other for a long time, but just for people that might not know you or kind of how you got into yoga, tell me a little bit about how you transitioned from working in the entertainment industry as a model actress into yoga.
Yeah, so I'll rewind a little bit and just share for people who might not know that we used to live together in Mumbai before we both moved to LA and New York City. But like that's, our experience was that, and we were both in the entertainment industry a long time ago. So just for everyone who doesn't know that, it's so funny because I started practicing yoga a long time ago, but I just never thought of it as a potential career. I was like vaguely introduced to it growing up, and I say vaguely because it wasn't something that we did all of the time, but it was there as something that I knew was like maybe like Indian, like I knew it was Indian, I knew it was related to something spiritual, I knew it could be a very really healing methodology. Like my mom went to Iyengar yoga, or we'd have teachers come to our home. So I think that's something that my experience of it was a little bit different than maybe what it is now here. But I just wasn't really into it growing up because I really struggled to slow down. And I like meditation just felt so inaccessible to me. I was like a really rowdy little kid. And then it wasn't until right after I graduated college that I got really into it. So I'd kind of like given up all of my other physical activities. And I also just happened to be in a place that was like really anxiety inducing because I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Like I studied math, and I realized I probably didn't want to pursue finance. And my parents lived in Bangalore. They still live there, but like they had basically retired from their careers in the US and moved to Bangalore. So I didn't have a home in the US. So I went to Bangalore, and I was just like, I had nothing to do, and I practiced a lot. I practiced a lot because it made me feel better. So I didn't really like know what it was, like what I was getting myself into. I didn't have like a teacher off the bat or anything. My mom went to Iyengar classes. I did what probably everybody else has done or did at some point like 10 or 15 years ago. And I like found everything that existed on the internet, yoga related. So like these old Rodney Yee videos and like David Swenson videos. And I just kind of explored. And, thankfully in India, there are other places you can go. So I got to kind of see what worked for me. And because I had literally nothing to do, I practiced a lot. It made me feel better. And I didn't really understand why, but I just kept doing it. And it made me feel better when I was at a really anxious time. And I remember my mom suggesting once, like, especially because I was in Bangalore, she was like, why don't you go to Mysore? Why don't you learn more and then like open a yoga school or something? And I was like, definitely not. Like, that is not for me. I only want yoga for myself and I'm not interested. And I just like moved on. And so it was just something that was kind of in the background of my life that I had for me. And over time, I think I started to delve deeper, right? I started to realize like there was a whole philosophy behind it. And that philosophy was really closely related to a lot of like what I already knew to be it, like with regard to spirituality, right? That there was a purpose, like, it's not just like a physical thing you're doing. So the more that I kept practicing it, the more I got to understand more. I found some awesome teachers. And I think that by the time, I met you and I'd been in Mumbai for a while, I think I was like, maybe when I retire, I'll open a yoga studio. Like that was like my plan. And so basically I had this idea that somewhere down the line, maybe I could engage in this in a different way, engage with yoga in a different way, in a way that was like more a bigger part of my life. And so I was going to New York to go to Stella Adler. And I had the whole summer off. And that was like one of the best parts. It's like monsooning in India. I was like, I'm gonna take the summer off and go do something else. So I was like, all right, I have the whole summer. And I was like, maybe while I'm there, I should just do like a yoga thing. Cause like, why not? Because I'm interested in it and I have the time. And if I want to open a yoga studio one day, like I should probably get cracking on learning. And I did the Stella Adler course and I did the training. And I realized that like I wanted something different than what I had with my life. Like I really loved my job and loved my life, but I also wanted to have more of a voice. I wanted to have more of a role in what I was putting out into the world. I wanted to interact more with people and be able to have some kind of a positive impact. And I knew that was part of why I wanted to like be engaged in something creative, like acting anyway. It was like really to be able to tell stories. But I found with yoga, like it was so accessible. And it just came so naturally to me that after doing that training, I realized like, maybe I don't want to move back right now. Maybe I don't want to go back to just being in front of a camera. Maybe I need to like pause and see what this has to offer. And so I just like impromptu stayed in New York City, which my parents loved and had to had to like take care of. They like sold my car and like helped me deal with all of my stuff that I still had in Bombay.
Yeah, I remember what a transition time that was for you and like for all of us, just, totally on a whim, changing your life in the direction it's going in.
Yeah, it was really intense. I think that what made it possible for me was that my family was so on board with it. Like they were very much like, yes, you should do something different.
Yeah.
And that helped. That helped me move in a different direction. And my little brother was already in New York, so like it wasn't like I was like totally alone. First of all, I've always wanted to live in New York. It wasn't, I grew up in New Jersey with my dad and my brother in New York. We came to New York all the time. It was like, in my mind, like adult meant living in New York anyway. So like, I was like, okay, like here we go. New York, my brother already lived here. And so we were like, all right, like we'll just see how this goes. In my mind, I was also like, I can always go back. Everybody that I knew from India was like, you can come back, like, don't worry if you leave. And I still feel like it's true. Not that I would necessarily go back in the same way, but like nothing in life is like, you're making the story of your life. If you want to change it, you can.
Yes.
So I moved to New York and I was just trying to figure it out. And it was really interesting. Actually, one of the things I remember often is just going to a lot of different studios and the experience of studios in New York being very different from studios in India.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's a big difference.
Yeah, like I asked one of my teachers in India for a recommendation actually in New York, and that studio doesn't exist anymore where I went. But I just remember like going to this teacher's class and being like, why does this feel so competitive? Like no one is saying that it's a competition, but why does it feel like this? And like, it just felt really different. Like, I feel like in India, there's this, even if it's not being taught overtly, there's this feeling of spirituality around yoga. And I don't know if I felt that at every single studio in the US, but eventually I found it. I went to a class that really resonated, a teacher who's really incredible. Her name is Kat Aquaviva. She still teaches, but she's not in New York. And I was like, okay, maybe I could fit in here. You know, maybe this would be a place that I could fit in. And I remember actually telling one day, I remember sitting down with the owner and telling him that I wanted to open a studio. But really long story short, what happened was it's hard to get hired. I had an agency here. I kept working, like modeling, working. And I had to go through like a mentorship program. I worked a lot and basically was just like obsessive about yoga until I got hired. And then I had to teach a lot and like really work on building my client roster and like also I feel like, you know, yoga is the kind of thing where the learning never ends. So like just continuing to train. And eventually I think after time, I found myself in a position where I was able to kind of make it or feel more stable and able to leave my agency. So I was teaching classes and a few privates, and I began to also be a part of the teacher training program. And I guess that's really how I got there. I also realized that I didn't want to open a studio in New York, though. After working at a studio in New York, I was like, oh no, I don't want to do this.
How do you feel like, so during your time when your career was more focused on acting and modeling, and like I remember you would practice yoga, but how involved would you say you were mentally with yoga? Like, was it something that you would do, you know, every day to kind of help you center and focus and deal with the pressures of being in the entertainment industry? Or like how active of a role was that in your life at that point?
You know what's so interesting is that I didn't understand why yoga helped. I remember that from the very beginning, like of when I was in India, if I didn't practice yoga for a while, my brother would ask me, he would like call me out on it because my like mood, my behavior would change. And I really didn't understand why it was like that. But yeah, I feel like it was always a really kind of personal thing. So I would like usually practice a little bit in the morning, and I don't know. It was just like maybe it was that it was like a really stable part of my life. It was something that wasn't changing even when everything else was, you know. And it wasn't. I remember buying like the Yoga Sutras and Light on Yoga, um, just to kind of start. I just something like I was like I don't know why this is having this effect on me, but I'm gonna have to like start to inquire and start to understand more and like just like figure out what this is because I didn't have a great teacher until actually I did find some great teachers in Mumbai, but like not off the bat, right? Not at the beginning. At the beginning, I was still practicing more on my own, which I think is how a lot of people are. They either are having somebody come to their home and teach them, or they're doing a self-practice. And I think that's okay. But also there's a lot to learn from people who are, you know, who've been studying and so eventually I kind of like I think made that transition to being like, oh, there is so much more to this and I should like try to inquire, you know. Yeah.
How have you noticed, like over the years, now that yoga and meditation is like a habit, it's something that's part of your daily life, how have you noticed your own life or your moods or your mental state just change and shift?
I think that the thing that changed the most is just my relationship to myself and the relationship to my emotions and the way, and actually to the world. I think there's a way to be able to notice what's happening without getting carried away with it. That is a really big part of the practice, especially actually meditation. I think there's a way to kind of, I think yoga really seeks equanimity. So it's like, instead of kind of going on this roller coaster of the highs and lows of life, you find a little bit more stability. And that's something you have to practice. There's so many parts of yoga that are really applicable to life in a way that is practical. Like you have these habits, you have these pathways that you're trying to notice in your yoga practice and then maybe unravel a little bit or change. And maybe that is the way that you react to something, or maybe it's like the way you always do a pose. It doesn't really, it could apply to anything. It's not really that specific, but I think all of those things over time just become a little bit easier to figure out and see in your life. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest change.
I also think like with yoga and meditation, when you start making it a habit, like I've noticed, because you're focusing on your body, it's like a moving meditation, you're focusing on your breath, those things seep into your daily life. Like you're more aware of your surroundings, you're more aware of your body. And sort of as you mentioned earlier, like with Eastern philosophy or Eastern upbringing, like meditation is something that probably you or me, like it's not something that's completely foreign. Like I grew up with family members meditating, you know, my mom does Reiki. And so these were like things that are familiar to me, and I'm sure were familiar to you. So how do you feel that like when you're teaching meditation to people who are beginners and maybe don't have the same background, or maybe they didn't come from a place where they have this like spiritual connection, what do you think that are some of the challenges that beginners notice with this practice?
Okay, so I want to be really clear because I think one of the reasons that these practices can be confusing and complicated for beginners is because there's so many different lineages and traditions and philosophies behind them, and some of them are conflicting. So like if your teacher isn't very clear about what they're teaching, it's going to be harder for you to feel successful. So yoga has one particular kind of idea of what the world is. Well, there's like different kinds of yoga, but like let's just say yoga has in particular what most people practice, which is like Yoga Sutras yoga, Samkhya yoga, like that has one particular worldview and an idea of what meditation is and what liberation looks like, what your goal is. I mostly teach Vipassana meditation. So that comes from a Vipassana tradition, which is a little different than yoga. And I think what's really, really important is to get clear on like, Vipassana is actually, the reason I teach that is because it is like the backbone of what now people are calling mindfulness meditation. Okay. So that's where mindfulness practices come from. And, you know, I don't think you have to be Buddhist to be able to do this practice in a way that's still honoring these traditions. But it's really important to understand, like, okay, so you're going into mindfulness meditation, like here are the most important things for you to know. This is what this practice is about. You know, it's about mindfulness. And what does mindfulness mean? Like define that, and then define like the different aspects of meditation. And I'll say for beginners, like I think my, you know, top tips are probably like, don't judge your practice, you know?
It can be so overwhelming when you're first getting into meditation because like now you hear words like buzzwords like mindfulness meditation all the time, whether there's like tons of books, there's, you know, apps, there's all these things that are making it more accessible to people. But like, I know even like 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't the same, like the meditation wellness space wasn't exactly what it is now, but I know it can be really overwhelming because it's like, where do you start? And I don't know if this is something that you hear a lot, but like with meditation, like, and I'm not a meditation teacher, but when I talk to people about meditating, or I say, yeah, I try to meditate every day, people are just like, well, I can't clear my mind. Like, I don't know how to, you know, hush my mind. And I'm sure that's probably something that you hear a lot too, right? Because that's what they think they're supposed to do, or the goal is.
And I think that's really why I think it's important to get clear on what you're doing. Like, and that's why when I feel like, actually, I'll just do a shameless plug. I just started teaching like this mindfulness meditation basics kind of course on Peloton for that purpose, because I was like, it's really hard. Like, it's so hard to know what to do unless someone says, this is your goal and you're doing it right. So I think that different kinds of meditation do have different like ways of meditating to begin with. There's like concentration practices. There's the practices where you're trying to completely clear your mind, and mindfulness is not that. Mindfulness meditation, which I think is really applicable to life and like honestly transformative, is really just about noticing what's happening. Yeah. Like moment to moment, and doing that in a way that's compassionate. So you're not judgmental, because it can be easy to, like, especially when you're noticing your thoughts or your feelings, to get just like carried away with them. And that's obviously natural. It's also important to know that in like that meditation practice, especially, like, I won't speak to different practices that I don't teach or know very well. Getting lost in thought is like part of practice. That's like part of how you are getting better at meditating like, it's like you're, you know, you like go to the gym and strength train so you get stronger. Like every
Yeah.
time you bring yourself back from a thought, you're strengthening your mindfulness, like your focus, your concentration. And that's part of the practice. And there's no judgment about like that happening because you're a human. So it's okay. And I think it's really important for all of us, like not judge our practice, and just like, you know, kind of like have that equanimity around, okay, I practice for 10 minutes, even if I spend 90 minutes of it with my mind wandering, like I still practiced, I'm going to do it again tomorrow, and just like keep going and
Yeah.
keep trying, because it just takes effort.
And like you said, it's like brain training. Like the first time you go to the gym and try to do an exercise, you're not going to have conquered it. You have to continue to show up and do that. And that's something that I noticed that worked really well for me when I would start meditating more regularly, is that concentrating on my breath, like whether I'm doing a guided meditation or just sitting by myself, concentrating on my breath and just allowing a thought to come and have no judgment. Because, you know, that's why they call it monkey mind, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
your mind is always wants something to focus on. So with meditation, you're giving it something to focus on, like whether it's your breath or just like the awareness that, okay, I'm thinking about something I have to do later. And the more you do that, and I think you bring awareness to that, the easier it is. You're going to get better at it, and you'll notice it affect your life. Because if you close your eyes and you're just like, don't think, like that's impossible. Like that's what the mind is there to do, is to think and to have thoughts.
Totally. Also,
yeah, go ahead.
when you start to create that awareness, like, oh, thinking, like, or sometimes honestly it's like, let's say like you're doing a mindfulness, like your focus is on your thought, so when a thought comes up, you like pay attention to like the tone of your thought, like you start to realize like, oh, like maybe I'm kind of mean to myself, or maybe I'm kind of mean about somebody else, like, whatever it is, like it gives you then the space to start to change. It's like, it's like that, it's like what Viktor Frankl says, right? It's like between stimulus and response, you have this pause, and meditation is just creating that pause for you so you can decide how you want to respond instead of like continually reacting, because life is going to keep coming at you, like life is not slowing down, you know. So you have to change how you're responding to life.
And I think we're all moving so fast paced. And when you take that time, like even if it's just 10 minutes a day, like I've noticed in meditations for myself, like I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a judgmental person, but then I would realize that a lot of my thoughts were judgmental towards myself. Or, you know,
Yeah.
or you're always being like, oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do this enough, or why are, and it's just like, but I wouldn't have even gotten to that conclusion, come to that conclusion, or realize that had I not been focusing and just letting my thoughts come and seeing that. And then that's something that, you know, I can work on changing in my daily life and maybe break that habit or just learn from that, because I was taking those 10, 15 minutes every day to just sit quietly by myself and focus on that.
Completely agree. And I think it's such a shame that honestly, for most of us, like I don't think that's an uncommon experience. I think for most of us, like one of the things that we start to recognize through these practices is that like we're not very nice to ourselves or about ourselves. And like, yes, we live in the kind of environment that equates like productivity with self-value, and we are bombarded with messages that we should be doing more, or you know, whatever it is. I think that actually taking the time to spend 10 minutes like really looking within and doing that in a compassionate way can help to change some of those habits that like the world is kind of throwing at us, to recognize that like, you know, you're not the amount of hours you put in at work.
Yeah.
If nothing else.
People just need to, we all do it, but we have to remember to be really compassionate towards ourselves. And like, you're not going to be perfect, you know? And I think people see other yogis or people that practice meditation and yoga, and they're like, oh, I'm not like them, you know, how do I get to this stage when I can practice like they do, or I can teach like they do, or I have this wisdom? And I think, I mean, I'm sure you get this question, like people want to kind of know how you got to where you are. Like, you know, I want to do that, I want to be that. And I think there's a lot of pressure, especially, you know, social media helps, but also it's all right there in front of you, you know, to compare yourself. And how do you kind of deal with that, you know, how, like you personally?
Um, I definitely think social media is a comparison trap. I think that one of the things that yoga and meditation lend to you, if you've done it for a while, is eventually realize it's not really about the poses. It's definitely not about how you look. It's not about your yoga pants. And nobody's perfect. No matter what their Instagram looks like, they're not perfect. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is the ultimate meditator. That doesn't exist. Um, I'll rewind and say one of the things that helps me with comparison is reframing comparison. So instead of being like, wow, I wish I had what that person had, to be like, wow, I'm so happy for this person and what they have, and for them for showing me what can exist. And then instead of being like jealous or unhappy or whatever, I get to share in that joy. And so I can be happy for them. And it's kind of like this weird flip that I think makes you celebrate our interconnectedness and definitely also try to not fall into that trap. The comparison trap is a really real thing, I think, and I think Instagram really is a part of that. So I think that's really important. I also think with that, especially, and I don't necessarily mean this with yoga and meditation, but just with life, like to remember that everybody's at a different point in their journey, right? Like you might be starting and somebody might have been doing this for 15 years. Like do not compare yourself. You focus on you. Like the most important thing I can say about that is about, whatever your journey is focus on you. That's what's important. Like focusing on somebody else is not going to get you to where you want to go. I think it makes me sad that, if you Google yoga or yoga teacher, that there's like a particular kind of image you'll see, or like a body type that you'll see, or clothes that you'll see, and that's what people will equate yoga to be, because it's not true. You can wear whatever you want and look anyway. Yoga is for everybody. Meditation is for everybody. And I hope that, as we continue to evolve, and everybody I think is becoming a little bit more conscious about this as the industry evolves and grows, that maybe there's a little bit more light shed on that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head, and it was really well said. Like, social media can be a comparison trap, but when you reframe something, and if you can even have gratitude, like sometimes I see people or things or brands and I'm like, wow, like I wish I could be there. And then I try to stop and think about something that I'm grateful for that I have, and remember that, as you said, like it's not everything looks perfect and shiny and pretty, but like there's a story behind it. Everyone worked hard to where they are, and not comparing yourself is very hard to do. But I think that just like having gratitude in what you do have, and remembering, feeling happy for someone else, and knowing that there's enough love and positivity and success for everyone. It's not like only these people get it and nobody in that space can get it. And you can have it in your own way and in a different way, and you might just be at a different point on that journey. And I think that sometimes social media does bombard you because you kind of see maybe just the top of the top, but there is enough to go around where everyone can share in this success and this happiness, right?
I absolutely think that's 100% true. I think that sometimes we put ourselves in positions of competition when we don't even need to. Like, I also think, like, and I've definitely fallen into this trap too. Sometimes, like, I'll see something and I'll be like, damn, I wish I had thought of that. Like, I really like this person, Anita launched a YouTube channel. I should have launched a YouTube channel. Why didn't I? And then like, I'll have to like backtrack and be like, wait, like, do you even really want to launch a YouTube channel? Like, this makes sense for Anita. Does it make sense for you? Like, or is this just like an automatic reaction? Like, I feel like sometimes we're on autopilot like that. And so just to be like take a step back and be like, I've got a lot, like, I'm doing okay. And yeah, like, this is really exciting for Anita. Like, I I think that, yeah, I feel like we do fall into that like kind of automatic response sometimes for some reason. And that's something we can start to work on. Like, meditation is a part of that. Be like, wait, why did I react that way? That's so silly. and I don't really feel that way. Like it's just a conditioned response because of whatever. And to be like, okay, that's not how I want to behave about this. Actually, actually for whoever, for most of us, like most of the people probably watching this, there are a lot of people who'd love to trade lives with us. Like,
Yeah.
not that that's a great thing, but it's like, to be grateful for where we are and to be happy for what other people are getting to experience.
It is, and it is sometimes like you need to think outside your bubble, because I've said things like that before where I'm like, well, I wish that I had this and this person just has all this stuff, and or you just wish that you were like, oh, if I had only gotten into this a little sooner, I would be here. But it's like, and then I have to remember, but like there's probably somebody else that's thinking that about me, or
Yeah.
there's always someone that's like, well, oh, I wish that I could have had the opportunity to live in India, or maybe I looked like that, or I was like, there's always that thing. And I think when you meditate and those things come up on, on your yoga mat, or when you're sitting and meditating, you can learn to like let it go, not judge it. Like, we're all human. There's no way I'm never going to compare myself to someone again or ever feel jealous. That's crazy, of course. But not letting it consume me and understanding how to process it and then let it go, and feeling grateful for what I have, where I am, and if anything, using that to motivate you to want to do better.
Right. Like, hey, this is an example of what I could achieve or people can achieve, I think that's really true. I also think it's like, one thing to remember is that social media is a lie. Like, it really is. Like, it is, you are seeing a curated feed of what people want you to see. You don't know what their life is like.
Yep.
So it's probably not something you should just believe, I think that's like, it's really important to remember that.
How do you manage sort of the social media, or like the I don't know what the word to describe it is, or sort of like how do you manage your own personal practice and also keeping up with social media? Like there's like these two sort of personas. There's like the Aditi that nobody sees, that's like when you're focusing and meditating, and then the stuff that you do for yourself or your brand or your job.
That's a great question. I try, first of all, to not let my life be consumed with social media. So I'm not a person that puts my entire day on social media. I have kind of like, I've just realized that I will find more joy and wholeness when I'm really present. I think all of the most important parts and moments in my life have happened when I'm really present for them. And that doesn't happen when I'm trying to capture it on camera. So that's helped me. That's helped me, first of all, to just even recognize that, so that I'm not like too worried about, like, I don't get caught up in like, must put everything on my story, because I don't need to.
Yeah.
I try really hard to be authentic. I think that, my social media at this point, it's like public. So that means that it's really focused on like, yes, what I'm doing in public. I don't really post a lot of private moments on there. And I think that that's totally fine, but I try really hard to, I have this amazing community at Peloton, and the more I get to know them, the more I love them. They're really like supportive, wonderful people. I hear from them all the time, and I start to understand more like where everybody is, what everybody's going through, like who are the people that make up the community. And so it's really like, for me, it's a way to be able to connect more with them, and through them also, a larger world. I think that social media right now is a really kind of tricky place to be, because there's a lot of activism going on, and I think we all are trying to figure out what our roles are within that, which is also, I think that's okay. And I think that's another instance in which it's a good idea to like take the pressure off a little bit and consider, what role social media plays for you. For me, I also I went through a lot of trying to figure out what my mission was as like this kind of public facing instructor. Like, what is my mission? What's my goal? And what do I want to use my brand and my platform for? And so basically, by doing that, it helped me to decide what I want to post, and what I'm comfortable saying or not saying, how much I want to engage with certain different aspects. So I really only collaborate with brands. Like if I post about a brand and it's not an ad, it's because I really love them. If I post about a brand and it is an ad, I've probably taken the time to get to know them and make sure that like I want to stand behind this brand. And past that, I really only post things that like I think are helpful or will make a difference. Yeah.
You know, yoga in the West, like, is the practices here, like we were just talking about, the culture surrounding yoga in the West is very different from the East and what you experienced over there. What does yoga represent to you personally, and sort of where do you draw your practice and your teachings from?
So I actually have a teacher who lives in India who I study with, which is helpful, I think. But I think that yoga, there's a lot of different lineages. So I'll speak from my personal understanding, which is from a Yoga Sutra like Samkhya Yoga lens, that yoga is really this system of conscious living. And when I say conscious living, I mean it means that you understand the world that we live in, and yoga has really has a really specific idea of what the world is, right? So our goal in yoga is for us to start to identify with our highest self, which is like kind of that divine part of you that's within you. Like you could think of it like as a soul. There's a lot of different ways to talk about it. But basically the point of yoga is for you to start to identify with that. And so it's a whole system that leads you towards that. And that's supposed to lead you towards liberation. And there's a whole lot more like along the way, of course, but it's a really clear system. And that system includes more than just asana and more than just like this movement practice. It includes all of the other parts, including ethics and meditation. And so I think it's actually really important for us to acknowledge that and to include some of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So is there something in particular that you would like to see change in the yoga and meditation industry?
I would love to see a little bit more representation. You know, I think that yoga practices, for the most part, come from Asia. There's Kemetic yoga that comes from like Egypt, Africa, but really the majority of what we're practicing is coming from Asia. But if you like Google yoga teacher, like you're not seeing a lot of Asians, and I think most of us probably can't count more than 5 Asian yoga teachers that we know of on our hands. So I would love to see more of that. And I think that along with that, hopefully we would see also kind of a little bit more of an honoring of, you know, the roots of yoga, a little bit more of tradition, a little bit more maybe of intention of spirituality that comes into it. I think that there are problematic parts of yoga culture, and actually like the way that yoga is meant to be, the way like where it comes from, the way that it's taught, is not supposed to make you question your clothes and your body, right? Like that's not part of this practice. That's nothing that I never felt that way or experienced that when I was in India. I never thought about it. Like it never occurred to me. So I hope that as we move forward, those are things that can kind of evolve. And I think, again, I think it's happening. I think that people are conscious about it. I think that there's a conversation happening that I'm happy about. But I hope it continues to move forward.
For people that don't, maybe have never taken your classes, where can they find your yoga and meditation classes? And do you have specific ones that you recommend for beginners?
Yes. So I have classes live and on demand on Peloton, both yoga and meditation. There's a lot of different kinds of classes, so there's something for everyone. I put together a beginner program. So there's a link to it on my website that just like has a list of the classes, and it's also like somewhere saved on my Instagram, or you can message me and I'll send it to you. But really like that's a good place to start. I basically taught a series of classes that it goes really step by step. Like this is understanding forward folds, this is understanding standing poses, and then like hopefully like by the end of that program you feel more comfortable just taking a longer regular beginner class. I'm doing exactly the same thing for meditation right now. So there's like a mindfulness meditation beginner series. It's happening now. And every week there's like a new episode dropping basically that you can practice for the week, because it takes a second. So the reason that I decided not to drop everything at once is because if you just learn what mindfulness meditation is and then you start practicing it, you got to practice it for a week before you can move on to like the next thing. So that's why it's coming once a week. So that's happening right now. And once it's all out, I'll like put it together in a little, I'll share so you can check that out too.
Thank you so much, seriously, for talking to me. This was so great. And you're so knowledgeable about yoga and meditation, and your classes are amazing. So I'm really excited to share this with everyone.
Thanks, Neaters.
If you guys are interested in keeping up with Aditi's classes, you can find her on the Peloton app, and I've also linked her website and social media below. I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation, and I'll see you next time.